West Coast. Good laws if the system is broke. Freedom of speech, what they trying to choke. Police squash civil liberties and hope. Believe $1's worth more than your vote. What good are laws if the system is broke? Freedom of speech, what they trying to choke. Police squash civil liberties and hope. Believe $1's worth more than your vote. In the streets, citizens become the enemy. Law enforcement acting like Roman centuries. No debate, 600 arrests at the G20. Officers refusing to show their face. Brutality on tape, uploaded the next day. You can't escape truth, this is a digital age. Auditors investigate and lay blame. The culprit is the whole political game. They're making tear gas rain. This is insane, human rights are the thing we used to maintain. Yet again and again, police ain't properly trained in anything except for the step and cause pain. But I keep on rapping and listening to as it happens, hoping one day to get some action on the issues and not just distractions and systematic misuse of our so-called democratic view. The good of laws if the system is broke. Freedom of speech, what they trying to choke. Police squash civil liberties and hope. Believe $1's worth more than your vote. What good of laws if the system is broke? Freedom of speech, what they trying to choke. Police squash civil liberties and hope. Believe $1's worth more than your vote. Racial profiling cuts like a razor. How many times you gotta use a taser before you're satisfied that a man is not a danger? Because he's of a different color, but we can't speak your language. All of this news has me feeling mad antsy. Hearing reviews who killed Robert Chikansky. Where's the honest, independent audit? Impossible with this conservative government. Looking for checks and balances. Unfortunately, authority don't respond well to challenges. No accountability. State like the military. In the House of Commons, no one responds civilly. Law of the land, what they disregarding. No respect for the vote while they keep proroguing parliament. Harnessing our peers to maintain there's a bargain. And falling farther and falling into the darkness. The good of laws if the system is broke. Freedom of speech, what they trying to choke. Police squash civil liberties and hope. Believe $1's worth more than your vote. What good of laws if the system is broke? Freedom of speech, what they trying to choke. Police squash civil liberties and hope. Believe $1's worth more than your vote. So get your mind up, and get your mind up, and get your mind up and open, and get your mind up, and get your mind up, and get your mind up. I am the beholder, so get your mind up, so get your minds up, so get your minds up and open, so get your mind up, so get your mind up, so get your mind up and open.
Well, joining us live from Paris now is Jude Finisterra. He's a spokesman for Dow Chemical.
Today, I'm very happy to announce that for the first time, Dow is accepting full responsibility for the Bhopal catastrophe.
This interview was inaccurate.
The hoax was an elaborate one. The prank knocked 3% off Dow shares.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a hoax. It's an honest representation of what Dow should be doing.
Louisiana officials are taken for a ride by the yes men.
The yes men? The yes men travel the world pulling pranks at corporate events.
My name is Fred. I'm from Halliburton.
My name is Francisco Guerrero.
I'm Northrop Goody. I'm with the World Trade Organization.
Rastus Ham is going to be speaking.
Ooh.
say you're a liar.
My name's Mike.
And I'm Andy. This is a movie in which the two of us
Fix the world.
You want something that's going to be able to save a human being no matter what Mother Nature throws at him. And so this is the Halliburton Survivaball.
We'll be happy to take any questions. Without oil, at least 4 billion people would starve, and starving would become the new black.
Expecting the next knock at the door to be Dow's lawyer.
No idea what Dow will do.
They threatened us.
I'm being. Are you allowed to do that to me?
We are preparing to go to the Gulf Coast Reconstruction Conference, and CNN is going to be covering it live.
ExxonMobil is earmarking $8.6 billion to finance wetlands rebuilding.
You just pulled off a heck of a hose.
Thank you.
Maybe it'll take a host like this to bring them out here to see what we going through.
I thought that was a wonderful thing to do.
This is actually truth-telling where normally there would only be lies.
If you could demonstrate the turtle position, please, that would be great.
Apparently I forgot to put the stinger. Hello everyone out there. I know we're doing this weird thing now where we're both streaming late and we are streaming we're both streaming late and also streaming really early, because normally we do not wake up until like 9 p.m. at night. So hi everyone on the stream. For people who are not used to us streaming at this hour as our first instant work of stuff, people call me Sidepocket on the internet. I'm the one with always the crazy hair, no matter what I do with it. I am not a con, but I'm also not a con. So inside joke. I'm one of the two co-founders of DCG 201, formerly known as DEF CON 201 or DC 201. We are one of the many DEF CON groups across the United States and across the world. And if you want to know more about us and our upcoming meetup next week on Friday the 17th, you can go down to our website. We're going to have more details later. You can find us all about us at defcon201.org, which I'm also going to post in chat. We're also all over many different types of social media, such as YouTube at defcon201NJ and all the others at defcon201, such as Instagram, GitHub, the host.social instance of Mastodon, among other things. And you can find that link well, not only on our website, but I just posted a master link in chat finally, and I just realized I completely forgot, because the scrambling today of turning on the PeerTube finally. I was going to do that before the stream because I think our PeerTube audience would really like this, but instead I'll just re-upload the stream when I get this working. But anyhow, if you are on Facebook, first of all, I apologize, but second of all, you can interact with chat, but because we're, I guess, a hacking channel, you need to basically hack it in order to make it work. There's a very simple website you can go to interface with our chat bot and being able to properly chat. So I just post that link in chat. So why are we streaming at this god-awful time? Well, normally, to be honest, the whole thing is I would do this at a much more favorable time. But unlike what people say on the internet, I actually do have a life, unfortunately. So that's why we're streaming this now. However, the reason why we're streaming, and I'm now going to go over to the other screen, is because there's multiple things going on today that are all related to each other. And if I can get the browser up, there we go. So today is actually the anniversary of the infamous World Trade Center protest. I'm dumb, not World Trade Center. The World Trade Organization protest. There's two different things. But this is something that actually affected my life when I was younger in the 1990s, and every single thing that you see now, from police brutality to how activist events are coordinated on the internet, how governments respond to hackers and hacktivists and protesters, all came from these sort of protests. And a big thing that came from these protests are the Yes Men, which is a group of social engineer pranksters, activists, or essentially hacktivists who, instead of going out there with picket signs demanding, rights and climate change and all the stuff that they want to achieve, they instead do an ingenious strategy, or at least ingenious back then, because now with the whole Trump fake news thing, everything's been fucked up there. But they essentially pretended to be the companies that they hate and either make them say a truth that the real life company would have to redact, or to put out something ridiculous so that the company would have to respond to it, and or government, and basically reveal something that they've been trying to brush underneath the rug. Later today, which me and a couple of other DCG 201 members are going to check out, there's going to actually be Andy and Mike from the film you're about to watch are going to be in New York City at the Carriage Trade Art Gallery. I'm going to post that link in chat. It's going to be from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the main reason why I'm kind of showing this off, and I'm going to go back to the face now real quick, is because I've actually done a ton of stuff with Mike and Andy of the S-Men. In fact, one of the things I'm going to bring with me tonight is I have one of these. I was one of the people that back in 2000, when was this printed? Back in 2009, so this is shortly after Obama got elected. It was basically in his first year. And you'll see this at the end of the film, we made these fake New York Times papers that we handed out for free. I came up with the ingenious social engineering lie that basically there was so much late breaking news that that we're sending New York Times subscribers these issues, but we need to get everything on the floor. Remember, this was before everything was truly on the internet, so we were like distributing free papers locally, and then people who have subscriptions would get them. That was my hack that I added to this, and that basically would shut up most people and take this paper. Uh, so as you can see, it's very much yellowed out, and it has a headline, Iraq War Ends, which I think is kind of sad and funny because this is like the hopeful Iraq War ends where, we establish a government, everyone pulls out, we actually deal with our veterans, and Bush gets to go away from jail forever instead of even more corruption happening, and Afghanistan and Iraq are back to square one, like what happened in real life. Uh, but this is like one of the relics from back then. I've done all sorts of pranks. I've done most of the pranks and hacktivism stuff that you're going to see in this film. And that's what we're going to be doing to celebrate the anniversary of these protests. Is we're going to be showing two videos. One is a shorter video by the Hated One explaining what the World Trade protesters are, what the World Trade protests and who was involved and the entire timeline what happened. It's a much shorter video than the film, and then we're going to directly play into switch over to the screen. We're going to be playing the main feature, which is the Yes Men Fix the World. There's a trilogy of Yes Men documentary films. This is the second one. I also helped put it together and promote it. In fact, the footage near the end where everyone's celebrating the Iraq War is over, I actually filmed that footage. So I actually have a IMDb credit. You can go look it up literally because of that. So these videos will be short. We'll probably be done between 1:30 and 2. And I also just want to remind before we play this is, yes, I will be looking in chat. So don't try anything not funny that you think is funny, and I will be glad to answer any questions or have anyone talk in chat. But I do want to remind that if you can see the bar above me, that we are trying to raise money for the Children's Miracle Network Hospitals, which is a charity organization that they accept donations and they distribute money in the United States and Canada to pediatric centers and children's hospitals across the United States and Canada, because kids already had it rough between injuries, sickness, mental conditions, physical conditions before the pandemic, and now it's even worse because of the pandemic. And of course, underfunded hospitals, understaffed hospitals, under the thumb of politicians who don't know the difference between COVID and an eggplant, things like that. So there's multiple ways that you can donate. All donations will be handled through Tiltify, which is a third party. We don't touch any of the money to prove that, hey, this is a legit thing. And currently we're at $278.50, a very exact number. Feel One Dead still dominates with his $69 donation, nice, but many have donated towards this, and we're basically only about a couple bucks away from halfway through our goal. And even if we don't make our goal by January 1st, all the money donated will go directly to the hospitals to help sick kids. So just donate $1, $5, $20 or $50 or $100 if you're crazy enough. We will shout you out and stuff. If you also follow and subscribe to us on Twitch, DLive, or YouTube, we'll also see those notifications and attempt to cheer you on. So without further ado, I'm going to post a link where you can donate. That's something I'm going to be recurrently post. We also have a QR code in the corner, and if you're on Twitch, there's a widget below where you can donate directly. If you're also on Twitch, by the time the credits roll in the movie, we're going to randomly rate a channel and end the stream, and we just thought this would be a cool, let me just raise the mic, cool, fun way to celebrate a honestly kind of a hopeful protest that ended up in complete tragedy. So without further ado, we're going to be getting an explanation of what the World Trade Organization protests in Seattle were, and then we're going to go directly into the film about the Yes Men, showing, even if you're not interested in all the political stuff, the social engineering tactics that they use to pretend to be companies is a gold mine in of itself. And we hope that at least at the end of this, despite all of the chaos and stuff, and also there might be some graphic warning, there's no blood or anything, but you will see protesters engaging rioters, you'll see police engaging rioters, you'll see people being pulled off of stages, so just that is just a warning for what you see in the video. But we hope that despite all the stuff going on, that one, this invigorates your soul to do some crazy social engineering of your own, constructive and positive, I might add. And also, we hope you get some laughs out of this. So without further ado, let's get right into this. So, see you on the other side.
The whole world is watching! 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 The whole world is watching!
5 days, 60,000 people, tear gas, rubber bullets, broken windows, police brutality, and millions of dollars in property damages. This is the Battle of Seattle, a week-long series of largely non-violent protests against the Ministerial Conference of the World Trade Organization, hosted in the birthplace of Microsoft and Amazon. They created a fertile soil for much of the pro-middle-class political rhetoric of today.
Trade with China cost us 3.2 million American jobs.
No more NAFTA. No more NAFTA. No more NAFTA.
From November 29th through December 3rd, 1999, Seattle became home to one of the largest demonstrations in modern US history. The Battle of Seattle was among the first mobilizations, internationally coordinated mainly via the internet, with 400,000 people taking part online. What in today's political climate would be an unlikely alliance, the WTO conference united under a common cause a powerful coalition of labor unions, media activists, association of churches, students, NGOs, international farm and industrial workers, and anti-globalists. Fair trade, transparency, respecting democratic process, human rights, labor laws, and environmental protection were among the top demands of protesters. But they didn't just demand justice for themselves, they also demanded cancellation of debt and abolition of child labor in developing countries. Protesters came from all backgrounds: young, seniors, men and women of all colors, indigenous people, workers, journalists, and artists. The city of Seattle, the police, and the WTO itself were all surprised by the caliber of protests. They weren't expecting such a coordinated act of civil disobedience from ordinary folks about an issue so nuanced as free trade and the World Trade Organization itself. World Trade Organization was a newly formed continuation of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade that existed since 1947. Overseeing 145 countries, the WTO's main objectives were liberalization of international trade and to promote and manage globalization of national economies around the world. The organization gave voice to multinational corporations from developed countries that allowed them to push for rules that would let them expand freely into developing nations, exploiting the benefits of less prudent labor and environmental regulations and cheap workforce. The World Trade Organization is in charge of some crucial issues that can critically impact national economies. It can set the limits on how much working conditions should improve or restrain import barriers on free trade in biotechnology and genetically modified food. Delegates are eagerly rushing to WTO meetings because the organization has the power to overrule regulations of national governments and all other international agreements and can resort to sanctions to enforce its rules. In the 1990s, US activists spread awareness that shrimp fishing is killing off endangered species of sea turtles. The Environmental Protection Agency soon adopted a regulation that all fishermen ought to use nets with escape hatches for the turtles to swim away. However, poorer countries did not adopt this rule, and shrimps from dragnet fishing could still be sold on American markets. The US Congress decided to introduce an import ban on shrimps that were caught in nets without escape hatches. However, the WTO doesn't allow import bans that are based on the ways of production, so the US government was forced to amend its own regulation to satisfy the World Trade Organization. This also happens to US import barriers on low-cost foreign steel that protected American steelworker unions. The WTO can also resolve disputes between member nations. Agriculturally exporting countries like the US, Canada, or Australia saw European and Japanese subsidies to their farmers, alongside food safety and environmental regulations, as unjustifiable distortions of free trade. This is where the WTO sided with the US, essentially undermining food independence of European and Asian nations. Resolution of these disputes underlines the fact that liberalization of trade is always a priority for the World Trade Organization. The WTO is a fuel of its own opposition. Much of what's being discussed happens in secrecy of elitist circles. The organization conceals a lot of documents crucial for decision-making, and the public is not allowed to comment on or attend WTO judicial hearings on trade disputes. Even from within the delegates or then US President Bill Clinton arose calls for more transparency of the talks, but nothing was materialized. The WTO is not accountable, as many of the delegates are not directly elected, but merely appointed ministers and deputies. A lot of the most important talks are even excluding majority of member states in so-called Green Room discussions. Green Room is a single committee of 25 member states, almost all of which are industrialized nations. The delegates excluded from the Green Room debates were not even told what was being discussed. This united delegates from more than 40 American and African countries who opposed the way the talks were being held and the way they were marginalized by the rich countries. Within a day, 1,700 groups from developing nations signed a petition objecting the Green Room and sidelining of the poor. The WTO is so decidedly pushing for free trade that it makes it look like there is an academic consensus that free trade is inherently positive. It gives poor countries a competitive advantage by offering cheap workforce and lax safety regulations. Consumers in rich countries can benefit from importing cheaper goods, and firms can get materials at lower costs. But then, 500,000 Indian workers demonstrated against the General Agreement of Tariffs and Trade, the predecessor of the WTO, to resist corporate expansion of multinationals into their country. It seems that people from countries on both ends of free trade are not so fond of the idea of economic globalization. One reason for people on the receiving end could be that a foreign corporation can easily outcompete local businesses, forcing them to take low-wage jobs instead. Rental properties lose out on disappearing middle-class enterprise that used their real estate for business. The economy becomes more vulnerable to market volatility and recessionary layoffs, as much of the economic force is concentrated within a smaller number of foreign corporations who have no national interest in the people and communities that work for them. Free trade greatly benefits rich corporations, but not so much the people in rich countries. Outsourcing of jobs costs millions of workers to go unemployed or take lower-paid jobs. The economic costs do not stay confined within those workers. As they lose income, they cut spending, which in turn deprives other businesses of their profits. Whether it affects poor or rich countries, free trade causes capital to flee out of local economies into the bank accounts of multinational corporations residing in tax havens. The GDP, stock markets, and CEO pays are booming, but not so much the rest of the economy. At 4 o'clock in the morning, a day before the conference opening ceremony, 5 activists climbed a construction crane to drop down this banner. By lunchtime, 3,500 people were already in the streets, hundreds of them dressed in turtle suits. A pro-WTO counter-demonstration was also planned, but only about 50 people showed up for that one. The following day, the protests were largely non-violent. However, a couple of dozens of young protesters, dressed in black and wearing black masks, smashed some newspaper boxes and windows in Nike stores. They were quickly chased away by peaceful protesters, while others chanted, "No violence, no violence."
Yeah, take off the mask! Take off your mask and join the rest of us and shut up!
By 10 a.m., the streets of Seattle are filled with 25,000 protesters. Many of them stage sit-ins and chain themselves together, thus blocking intersections between hotels and conference buildings. This prevents delegates from attending WTO functions. By noon, the opening ceremony is cancelled and protesters claim a major victory. At this time, up to 100 rioters in black clothing and masks smash windows of several retail stores, Bank of America, and McDonald's. Crowds of peaceful protesters stand between the stores and the violent rioters to prevent them from smashing windows. The police, standing 100 yards away, doesn't do anything against the rioters.
Several police officers have told us because they were assigned to control the protest crowds, they weren't allowed to break ranks and to stop the Black Bloc. So the group just continued destroying property for nearly an hour.
Instead, they heavily use pepper spray and tear gas against non-violent protesters who engage in peaceful sit-ins. By 3 p.m., Seattle police runs out of department-issued pepper spray. When President Clinton threatens the mayor of Seattle, Paul Schell, to shut down the whole conference unless the city is cleared, the mayor declares a state of emergency and a curfew from dusk till dawn in the downtown area. The city of Seattle calls in state patrol troops and National Guard for help. The next morning, December 1st, the mayor announces a ban on gas masks without exemptions. It takes the mayor several hours to exclude firefighters and journalists from this ban. However, reports of police brutality began piling up.
More line 20 feet.
I am not struggling at all. I am not struggling. I am peaceful. Remove your knee from my neck. This country is full. You sons of bitches.
I saw circumstances that are in fact troubling to me.
The police is ordered to arrest everybody in their way, and people are being chased down into the residential areas of Seattle.
We are residents. There was no protesters. None of us are protesters here.
Even bystanders and journalists who are not participating in the protests are arrested. Dozens of people are taken to hospitals for injuries. By the end of the day, 600 people end up in county jail. The following 2 days saw the focus of demonstrations shift from the WTO to Seattle police, where protesters demanded the release of all arrested demonstrators. On December 3rd, the US Trade Representative, Charlene Barshevsky, and WTO Director General Mike Moore suspend the conference, citing street actions as well as insider disagreements among the delegations. If you were to turn on your TV and watch the events in Seattle on the news, you would see images of a familiar city turned into a war zone by violent rioters and police struggling to disperse the crowds. You wouldn't be given a correct chronology of the events, that the police began using tear gas and pepper spray on peaceful protesters before any violence even occurred, that the police force was firing rubber bullets and threw flash and concussion grenades into the crowds of non-violent marchers, and that the violence was in fact mostly confined within small groups of rioters who called themselves Black Bloc or Brick Throwers, and who were mostly female in their late teens and early 20s. For them, vandalizing private property and spraying anarchist symbols was not seen as an act of violence. Looters took advantage of a disrupted city, yet the police took little to no action against their purely criminal and apolitical actions. But for the peaceful demonstrators, sending a message of non-violent civil disobedience was of uttermost importance. Most news cycles described demonstrations as anti-trade, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Seattle was built on trade, and most people realized that.
We're not against world trade, the rules of world trade. We're against world trade without rules.
The real demands were fair and green trade, given international markets oversight so that corporations cannot exploit children or workers in countries with poor labor conditions.
We've got to have better labor standards, and we've got to make sure that labor and environmentalists have a seat at the table.
They demanded that the WTO should respect rules and regulations of local governments and should not try to force free trade at the cost of democratic process. Part of the demonstrations were also teachings and info sessions, educating people about the issue of global trade and the WTO. Some delegates went out into the streets to meet with the protesters and engage in open discussions, and they were surprised by how well informed the people were about these issues. The Battle of Seattle resulted in $20 million in property damages and lost sales. US taxpayers had to cover additional $3 million for city cleanups and police overtime. The city of Seattle had to pay $250,000 to 157 protesters for violating their Fourth Amendment rights. The chief of Seattle Police, Norm Stamper, took full responsibility for failing to secure the streets from violence, and he resigned shortly afterwards. Today, whole 20 years later, the courageous demonstrations in Seattle are barely in our vague memory. No WTO conference was ever hosted on the US soil again, but the World Trade Organization can still overrule decision-making of 200 countries across the globe with virtually no oversight and transparency. The legacy of the Battle of Seattle is needed now more than ever.
The Chamber of Commerce needs the support of every American who gives a damn about free markets, private property, and fears creeping fascism. This country cannot afford for the insurance industry to cave. This country cannot afford for the Chamber of Commerce to cave. The Chamber of Commerce has been screwed.
Are you ready?
I'm extremely happy to be here because today is a very historic occasion for all of us at Dow, and I am grateful. Let's walk that way. I am grateful.
You're extremely pleased to be here.
I'm extremely pleased to be here. Yes, extremely pleased to be here, Steve.
This is my friend Andy. And my name is Mike. Today, I'm holding the camera.
And that's okay if every
It's a good thing to know.
Exactly.
Andy is about to go on live television in front of 300 million people. They're going to think that he represents one of the largest companies in the world, which he doesn't. And that's why he looks so nervous.
Should I typically just look right into the camera? Okay.
Andy's about to tell a really big lie, which, unfortunately, is going to wipe $2 billion off one company's stock price. But before I tell you this story,
1 minute.
I guess I should tell you how we got ourselves into this situation.
troubles, come on, get happy. You better chase all your cares away. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment day. The sun is shining, come on, get happy. The Lord is waiting to take your hand. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. We're going to the promised land. We're heading across the river, wash your sins away in the tide. It's awesome.
Hi, my name's Mike.
I'm Andy. And this is a movie in which the two of us
Fix the world.
Forget your troubles, come on, get happy.
Aren't we fixing the world?
Yes.
Come on.
I'm scared.
Get ready for the judgment day.
Now what?
What we do is pass ourselves off as representatives of big corporations we don't like. We make fake websites, then wait for people to accidentally invite us to conferences.
My name is Fred. I'm from Halliburton. My name is Hannaford Schmidt. I'm with the World Trade Organization. I'm from Arizona.
My name is Francisco Guerrero.
Oberlu Hochmax.
Hundreds of oil and gas executives were duped today.
Louisiana officials are taken for a ride by the yes men.
The yes men? The yes men. Anti-globalization activists that travel the world pulling pranks at corporate events.
A bunch of lefty protesters.
World-renowned troublemakers.
Sick, twisted, cruel.
And what they do is really to take absurd ideas and they present these ideas in all seriousness.
The group has done this many times before. They have a track record of getting away with it. So, how did this happen? Equity International says the imposter showed up.
At home in our underground headquarters, it was time to start planning our next mission.
Tens of thousands of Iraqis have died.
Worries are growing among top government and business leaders about the surge of food riots.
Markets continue to shake. Unemployment is up.
The oil companies reported the highest profits in the history of the world.
But with so many things going wrong, who should we go after next? We got our answer when a text message arrived. Dow Chemical had just bought Union Carbide, a company that became infamous in the 1980s. You remember the 1980s. Challenger, Chernobyl, Bhopal. Bhopal? In 1984, when Union Carbide's pesticide plant at Bhopal exploded, at least 5,000 people died within weeks, and 100,000 more remained sick for life. It was the biggest industrial disaster in history, but Union Carbide settled with the Indian government for $470 million, meaning most of the victims got less than $1,000 each.
Now, I just want to say to shareholders of Union Carbide that I am confident that the victims can be fairly and equitably compensated without a material adverse effect on the financial condition of Union Carbide Corporation.
There was little adverse effect on the shareholders, but in Bhopal, people continued to suffer. When Dow announced it would buy Union Carbide, there was finally hope for justice. Dow said it would compensate victims of Carbide's past negligence and promptly paid over $2 billion to 14 asbestos plaintiffs in Texas. Dow could do for Bhopal what they'd done for Texas, but we knew they wouldn't. So, we decided to do it for them. We set up a fake Dow Chemical website, dowethics.com, and we waited, and waited, and waited. Then one day, we got our chance.
You have mail.
We'd just been invited to a conference on international finance. Some of the biggest banks in the world would be there. These were the kind of banks who help companies like Union Carbide and Dow do what they do. A company might say, we're going to build a shoddy plant in an underdeveloped country with a corrupt legal system. The plant might explode and people might die, but we'll make a lot of money. And the bank comes back and says, great, sounds like a plan. What could we possibly do to show bankers what was wrong with this logic? So right now I'm painting Gilda, the gilded skeleton, actually the golden skeleton that we're going to use in the Dow Chemical lecture in London at a financial services conference in just a few short days.
The only good skeleton is a gold skeleton.
In case Gilda didn't scare them enough, we had a backup plan. We rented a theatrical pyrotechnics unit here so that we can make a big puff of smoke.
Ah!
We're on our way to a conference, and Erastus Hand is going to be speaking at the conference as Dow Chemical Company.
Our plan was to have Dow demonstrate, for the first time ever, exactly how they calculate the cash value of human life. Would this make the bankers think twice? It was time to find out.
Thank you very much. On May 1st, we are releasing the beta version of Acceptable Risk, the world's first market-smart risk calculator to help you find out instantly what risks are or are not acceptable from a bottom-line business perspective. Will Project X be just another skeleton in the closet, something your company comes to regret, or will it be a golden skeleton? A complex case is IBM's sale of technology to World War II Germany for use in identifying certain populations. This was very bad, of course, but no one can deny they were profitable, and although the issue remains a skeleton in the closet, in retrospect, it is quite clearly golden. Now, you may have heard the joke. How many Americans does it take to screw in a light bulb? 12. 1 to climb the ladder and 11 to file the lawsuit. What about Indians? Oh, just 1. We would, of course, never wish to imply that an Indian life is worth more or less than another. I myself believe in the sanctity of all life. But the market has its own logic, and if we're willing to live with it, we must make the most of the choices it makes. Because if there's one thing that we at Dow want you to remember today, it's that the only good skeleton is a gold skeleton. Ooh. Surprise. This is Gilda. She's the mascot for the Dow Acceptable Risk program. Gilda is here to basically tell you that if you have a skeleton in the closet, it may not be just a skeleton. It could very well be a golden skeleton as well. And as you move into a future of ever-increasing complexity and ever-increasing opportunities, Dow Acceptable Risk can assure you that your touch will be the Midas one. And I'd like to finish with a little poem. I'd rather be handsome than homely. I'd rather be youthful than old. If I can't have a bushel of silver, I'll do with a barrel of gold. So thank you very much. We hope you come up and get a closer look.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for having us. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Here's a keychain. Thank you very much. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
good.
don't have unfortunately, I don't have a card anymore. I've ran out of them. So.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, you were one of the earlier speakers. Thanks.
Yes, so it's a pleasure.
Thank you
It's
very
definitely
much.
very interesting. Is
Yeah.
it applicable? Is your model applicable to anything? I mean, is it applicable? Can we use it in risk management?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I'll have our risk management guys take a look at it because we do a lot of interesting things. So.
Wonderful.
Oh,
This is interesting. So.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay. Take care.
Yes, hello.
Hello, sorry.
Your case was, I want to introduce a new product on the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you, as I understood it, is that your risk assessor will work out what is the human
That's right.
impact threat to humans, as opposed to how much money can you make on it. whichever way you do this, you're going to cost some lives, right?
But
if you're going to make some money in the process of it, then it's acceptable. Is that right?
That's pretty much, that's exactly what I said. I mean, it's, did you find that not...
No, I thought it was refreshing, actually.
Okay.
Refreshing? We'd meant to be shocking, not refreshingly honest. To us, this was about as refreshing as the Kool-Aid in Jonestown.
The mass suicide and murder of more than 900 Americans took cyanide-laced fruit punch from their spiritual father and then lay down to die.
That's the thing about cults. What's shocking to outsiders seems normal to insiders. Is this why unfettered greed seemed normal to bankers? And if so, who was the cult leader here? This is Milton Friedman. We were told that he was the world's most influential economist.
Did government play a role in this? Very little, only by keeping the road clear for human greed and self-interest to promote the welfare of the consumer.
In this book, Friedman used the word freedom 374 times. But by freedom, he didn't mean this. He meant this: the freedom of corporations to profit, no matter the risk to people, and without interference from government.
Dr. Milton Friedman, a scientist, a careful thinker, and a great teacher.
The hero of freedom, Milton Friedman.
I sought out Dr. Friedman and had the great pleasure and privilege of meeting him and his economist wife, Rose. And we've all become friends, and now I call him Milton.
If we wanted to understand the banker's mindset, we needed to find the guru of greed. There was only one problem. But though Friedman had now ascended, his followers carried the flame.
Okay, so we should go in there.
Yeah.
Oh, great, thank you.
Uncle Milty.
These guys belong to free market think tanks, which have spent billions of corporate dollars trying to make us all believe that if we just let corporations do what they want, everything will work out great.
We're kind of on a quest. We want to fix the world, and we want to know how to do it.
Private property, rule of law, and a market unrestricted by government regulation and control.
When we see companies demonized, we should work against that. When we see the free market system castigated, we must work against that.
More wealth leads to greater efficiency and greater innovation, and basically all good things.
Wealth. Money.
Privatization.
Wealth.
Money.
Individualist freedom.
Privatization.
Free markets. Ownership.
And a great deal of money.
Capitalism and freedom.
Wealth and prosperity.
We were getting the message. And so were millions of others. These guys spread Friedman's free market gospel by any means that they can, like speaking to Congress, viral videos, and guest spots on Sunday morning talk shows. They claim to have derailed the Kyoto Protocol and to have helped destroy regulation around housing, banking, energy, and the environment. They agreed to meet pretty much anyone with a camera, even us.
You see there's a blue screen behind you. Mm-hmm. What would you like to be put in front of?
A planet Earth. Oh, cool, a blue screen.
I'd say the Jefferson Monument.
How about Jefferson Memorial? It's more...
It's already taken.
Oh, it is taken.
Somebody asked for
But
that.
I'm sure you have a good backdrop of Washington.
Don't put me in front of anything in Washington. I hate Washington. Put up a scene in outer space or something, you know?
I would say a world in which man is treated as an end in himself rather than a tool to be manipulated by those with political power.
How can we represent that? Is there a single image or a series of images?
I think that the images are of men, just the prosperity of free men, following what their hearts and desires lead them to.
I think we can find that.
That sounds good.
Now that we had our new friends at ease, It was time to ask them the really tough questions.
What would you say to people who harp on the Bhopal catastrophe or other tragedies?
Bhopal is an interesting example, but that facility had created educational opportunities for an Indian emerging technocratic class. It had created value added and tax base for the community, and something like 3,000 people died. That's a tragedy, but there are always risks of going into the future.
There are always risks of going into the future? For thousands of people in Bhopal, there was no future. At least the Jonestown suicide cult killed only themselves. The free marketeers seemed willing to put everyone else at risk. Back at home,
you have new mail.
We had mail. Turned out our Dow site was the gift that kept on giving. This time, it wasn't a mere conference. We'd hit the jackpot. The BBC, perhaps the world's most respected news organization, was doing a big broadcast about Bhopal, and they wanted to know whether Dow might finally clean up their mess. The interview, they said, would be broadcast to 300 million people. This was what we'd been waiting for. To the BBC's great surprise, Dow emailed back to say they would be delighted to speak publicly about the catastrophe. As for us, 300 million people was about 1 million times bigger than any other audience we'd ever had. We were scared. So we asked the BBC if instead of coming to their headquarters in London, we could meet them in neutral territory, the original land of revolution.
Are you a little nervous?
I'm so nervous. Oh, God. It's like going to the guillotine. I think it's right near where they used to have the guillotine, too, in Paris. The office. Yeah, I think it's the biggest thing we've ever done. This. I haven't combed my hair in like 20 years, yeah, really. Like, I think I used to do it this way. All right. Oh, God. Oh, God. When we acquired Union Carbide 3 years ago, we knew what we were getting, and today we are prepared to do the obvious. Let's see. Don't film too much when we get there, I think. Bonjour.
And you're watching BBC World. Our main headlines. The world's worst industrial accident is being remembered in India today. It's 20 years since deadly gas leaked from the Union Carbide chemical plant in the city of Bhopal. At least 18,000 deaths are attributed to the leak, and many local people say the contamination has never been properly cleared up.
Yeah. Should I typically just look right into the camera? Okay.
The factory still exists here, and that's been a real problem for the people living here locally. I mean, the site, I've been to it, and it's full of toxic waste. People who are living in these houses, they've all got a story to tell about that day 20 years ago. Many of them lost members of their family, and they say that they're continuing to suffer because of the tragedy. And they're saying somebody needs to answer for this. Legally, what they're saying is that they want to pursue the company to try and clean up the site, but whether the company will accept liability seems doubtful.
Well, joining us live from Paris now is Jude Finisterra. He's a spokesman for Dow Chemicals, which took over Union Carbide. Good morning to you. A day of commemoration in Bhopal. Do you now accept responsibility for what happened?
Steve, yes. Today is a great day for all of us at Dow, and I think for millions of people around the world as well. It's 20 years since the disaster, and today I'm very, very happy to announce that for the first time Dow is accepting full responsibility for the Bhopal catastrophe. We have a $12 billion plan to finally, at long last, fully compensate the victims, including the 120,000 who may need medical care for their entire lives, and to fully and swiftly remediate the Bhopal plant site. Now, when we acquired Union Carbide 3 years ago, we knew what we were getting, and it's worth $12 billion. $12 billion. We have resolved to liquidate Union Carbide, this nightmare for the world and this headache for Dow, and use the $12 billion to adequately compensate the victims.
Jude, that's good news that you have finally accepted responsibility. Some people would say too late. It's 3 years,
Yes.
almost 4 years on.
When we acquired Union Carbide, we did settle their liabilities in the United States immediately. And we are now, 3 years later, prepared to do the same in India. We should have done it 3 years ago. We are doing it now. And I would also like to say that this is no small matter, Steve. This is the first time in history that a publicly owned company of anything near the size of Dow has performed an action which is significantly against its bottom line simply because it's the right thing to do. And our shareholders may take a bit of a hit, Steve, but I think that if they're anything like me, they will be ecstatic to be part of such a historic occasion of doing right by those that we've wronged.
Just to reiterate what Jude Finisterra, the spokesman for Dow Chemicals, has just said, he says Dow Chemicals now fully accept responsibility for the events in Bhopal.
Great. That's it?
Well done.
Great. Now they wanted
Now you do
radio. I can tell you one thing. We're not going out of business. We will continue to make profit. We will simply make slightly less profit than normal. But we are doing the right thing. We're comparing here, though, the value of money to the value of human life, and there is no comparison.
It's a good thing to announce. For once,
Exactly. I mean, how often does Dow get to, you know? It wouldn't be, I wouldn't want to be a Dow spokesperson otherwise. Good. Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm going to have a serious nervous breakdown now.
Dow accepts responsibility for Bhopal, spokesman.
Where is that?
In Reuters.
Congratulations, your appearance. Everyone here at BBC cheered. It's over now and it's still headline news. Hello, this is Jude. Who has said that? Perhaps they're not in communication with the Dow leadership. Hello? Yes, this is Jude Finisterra. Sure. Right. Sure. Right. Let me just, yes, could I ask you to hold for a moment? Okay, thank you. They know. So now, I guess, I just basically come clean, right? Well, I wouldn't say it's a hoax. It's an honest representation of what Dow should be doing.
This morning, a false statement was carried by BBC World regarding responsibility for the Bhopal tragedy. The individual who made this statement identified himself as a Dow spokesperson named Jude Finisterra. Dow confirms that there was no basis whatsoever for this report.
Well, earlier today, we carried an interview with someone purporting to be from Dow Chemical, a company which subsequently bought the plant from Union Carbide. This interview was inaccurate and part of an elaborate deception.
Take a look at this, Dow. Look at this. This is the top of Google News. Dow said on Friday there was no basis whatsoever in a BBC World report saying it had accepted responsibility for India's Bhopal disaster. That's a funny sentence.
The hoax was an elaborate one involving a fake website.
Dow Chemicals was quick to issue a series of statements denying all knowledge of Jude Finisterra.
Also tonight, backtracking because of this man.
We're going back to the BBC television studio right now that we were at this morning because they want to talk to us. Thought, well, okay, what do they want to know? Well, let's go see.
So your real name is Andy, right?
Yeah.
When
Hello.
did I?
Sorry.
When did it occur to you to pull this off?
It didn't occur to us at all. We got contacted by you guys.
You also have the Dow share price.
Yeah, I did hear that. Has it gone back up? Or?
Well, the prank which briefly knocked 3% off Dow shares comes 20 years to the day after the chemical leak from the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal.
Today's unlikely corporate humiliation of a US chemical giant was all about reminding the world that Bhopal remains an unhealed sore.
Well, earlier I spoke to Andy Bickelbaum and I asked him what he did when he got an email from the BBC asking him for an interview.
Essentially, Dow has been promulgating a hoax by which they've convinced people that they can't do anything about Bhopal, that they cannot accept responsibility. And we wanted to prove that that was not accurate.
I mean, it is nevertheless a pretty cruel trick to play on the people of Bhopal.
Well,
did you think about the people of Bhopal when you decided to peddle this stunt?
Yes, we did. And
well, that surely is the tragedy of today. You spring upon them the actual hoax that they actually suddenly believe that they have got a payout from Dow, and then, you know, an hour or two later they find it's untrue.
Let's put this in contrast. I mean, we may have given two people 2 hours of false hope. Dow has given them 20 years of suffering. I mean, this is what we're faced
expecting
with.
the next knock at the door to be Dow's lawyer?
No idea what Dow will do.
Dow's lawyers didn't call, and millions of people learned for the first time that 20 years on, Bhopal was never cleaned up. But the media also reported that many of the victims in Bhopal cried tears of joy upon hearing the news, and were then bitterly disappointed. Had we actually upset the people we'd meant to help? There was only one way to find out.
Here we are, we're in India. Hey! And this is Bhopal. Bhopal is a big city. There's over 1 million people here. Unfortunately, we heard from a lot of news reports that the victims here in Bhopal were extremely upset because we had raised false hopes about them actually getting some compensation after 21 years. What do you think they'll do?
Well, I don't know. I mean, what's the local custom here? I mean...
We're here at the Sambhavna Clinic, and this place was set up by a bunch of people to help treat the gas victims of the worst industrial accident in history.
So patients come in from here. This is a forum, basically, where we determine their history of gas exposure, how far they were living, or were they sleeping in a tent that night, and then their severity grade is determined. These are some of the disabled children, and every system of the body has been affected. You know, the musculoskeleton, the nervous system. 40% of the women coming here under 40 have menopause. Yeah.
Hello.
This is so cute.
Hey, oh my God.
Hey. We got the news that Dow is willing to pay $12 billion. I mean, first we felt the news was too good to be true. And Dow was too bad for the news to be true.
Yeah.
But still, we thought maybe it is true. Maybe they're just seeing sense in this.
Yeah.
I mean, for about an hour, we were under that impression.
Yeah. Did people cry with joy?
I cried.
Oh, no.
I know lots of people cried.
Were you kind of angry at first, though, when you heard it was a hoax?
No, I wasn't angry. No. Wow.
You think it was worth it?
Totally worth it.
Okay.
We are saying no more Bhopal. What people have gone through here, no one else in the world should go through this.
I think we're in Shivaji Nagar, and it's been a little bit of
a maze getting here. A little, what do you call that? We got lost. That's what it's called. We're trying to meet up with a journalist to interview, and we got lost. Here he is.
Rajkumar Keswani broke the disaster story. In fact, he broke it years before it actually happened.
So you had already predicted how many times that the disaster would happen before it happened?
In newspapers 4 times, once to the chief minister, dozens of times to the local legislators, and once to the Supreme Court. I'm the most unfortunate person in this world who has got the recognition for his failure. Had I succeeded, it wouldn't have happened.
When you heard it was a hoax, the thing that we did, were you like, what did you think of it at first?
I thought that was a wonderful thing to do. We were put into a situation which we never thought of that would actually happen. So it is just like being in the heaven. Because I'm sure I'm not going to be in the heaven. So if I'm expecting hell, and suddenly someone puts me for a while in the heaven, so I said, okay, thanks.
20 years since the disaster, the poisons left behind at the plant were still leaching into the groundwater.
Communities that you see in red have not gotten a single drop of clean water.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Until now?
Until now. 8 communities are getting about 12% of the requirement. But this is contaminated water. Some of them used to drink, cook, wash clothes.
Dow could clean up their mess, but they didn't. Instead, they spent tens of millions of dollars on an ad campaign to clean up their image.
For each of us, there's a moment of discovery. And just then, in the flash of a synapse, we learn that life is elemental. And in the dazzling brilliance of this knowledge, we may overlook the element not listed on the chart. Its importance so obvious, its presence is simply understood. The missing element is the human element. And when we add it to the equation, the chemistry changes. The human element is the element of change. The human element. Nothing is more fundamental. Nothing more elemental.
This is Kevin Finn. He trades bonds.
This is what I do, sit here and just look at this screen for, 12 and 14 hours a day. It's very romantic, actually.
More than anyone else we knew, we thought Kevin could explain why Dow wouldn't do anything to fix Bhopal. He told us what happened when Andy went on the BBC.
I got a call from my clerk in the middle of the night. Dow Chemical made some announcement that the stockholders of Dow Chemical didn't like because Dow stock went down. The S&P 500 futures went down. I had to go roll out of bed. My clerk's like freaking out because my position's going against me. My friend tells me he thinks it's some global conspiracy of traders to try to screw us. And, it finds out it's 2 jokers.
The effect of our big announcement on the BBC was that Dow's stock lost over $2 billion in 23 minutes.
This tells me all the news that's happening in the world. So on December 3rd, if I was sitting here watching this, it would say, Dow Chemical decides to settle with the Bhopal people. And then people that own Dow Chemical be like, sold!
Everybody we talked to about that was really happy that Dow was doing the right thing.
Sure, okay. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be. I'm just saying that, sure, it seems like a good thing, unless I guess you're a Dow Chemical stockholder and you're expecting the $20 billion to go towards a dividend to come back to you or to come to buy some new chemical plant, and it's going to these people that, at least at this point, aren't able to get any money. I mean, you could see how that how they could be upset about that, right?
We were confused. As kids, we learned that it was bad to do something bad. And if you did something good, you got a reward. Yet when we announced Dow would do something great, the market gave Dow a spanking. So how could we get companies to do the right thing? We needed to change the rules of the market. But that meant regulation, and regulation meant government. The only problem was, government was drinking Friedman's free market Kool-Aid.
Free markets are working miracle after miracle of economic growth.
Open markets and rule-based trade are the best engines we know of.
But when the government stepped back and let the free enterprise system do its work, then the better we did, the more robust our economy grew, the better I did, and the better my business grew.
For the last 30 years, the leaders of most powerful countries did whatever the free marketeers recommended. And what they recommended was simple.
The solution is not to have government to intervene or regulate in some way.
In fact, most problems will solve themselves if ignored, and let free people working in free markets address them.
Following advice like this, governments around the world got rid of a whole bunch of regulations meant to protect people, like in banking.
I'm confident that the degree of harm or spillover effect, whatever subprime mortgages go bad, that the market will devise ways to minimize and diffuse the negative effects.
Their faith in the market was unshakable, but we all know what happened next.
Now with the world's largest insurance company, AIG, on the brink of collapse, it could mean devastation way beyond Wall Street.
What other disasters weren't coming?
Global warming is silly. It's not a serious issue. Warmer is healthier, and warmer is more pleasant, and that's why states like Arizona keep gaining population rapidly.
There are benefits to global warming. Cold-related deaths will actually decrease considerably.
Just like with the subprime mortgages, our free market friends were doing all they could to stop government from intervening. Except here, the stakes were higher.
I think it's quite possible that if it weren't for groups like ours, that the United States might very well be in the Kyoto Protocol by now.
And if you've seen the ads that we ran about a year ago, which we produced in-house on this global warming, where our essential contention is carbon dioxide, they call it pollution, we call it life.
There's something in these pictures you can't see. It's what we breathe out and plants breathe in. Carbon dioxide. They call it pollution. We call it life.
We got lots of hate mail. 2 senators this past fall sent a letter to ExxonMobil calling on it to stop funding CEI.
So Exxon was secretly paying think tanks to tell us we shouldn't regulate Exxon. Public outrage forced Exxon to stop.
In fact, ExxonMobil didn't fund us at all this past year.
That was great, but Exxon had other ways to influence policy. Like this guy, Lee Raymond. He's a trustee of one of the key free market think tanks. He also used to be Exxon's CEO, and the year he left that job, he became an official advisor to the U.S. government on energy matters. This was scary. If we let the free market cult keep running the world, there wouldn't be a world left to fix. We had to do something. So when we heard about a huge oil conference up in Canada, we decided to go. Posing as a big PR agency, we offered them Lee Raymond, Exxon's ex-CEO, as keynote speaker. They jumped at the chance. But what they didn't know is that on the day of the talk, Raymond would be suddenly unavailable, and an assistant would step in to replace him.
Okay. Yep. This keynote speech will attract substantial media coverage and will be one of the major highlights of Go Expo.
What would we do to shake this audience up? It would have to be more shocking than anything we'd done before.
If there's
there's one thing that's going to be abundant in the world to come, what with climate change and all that, it's people, dead people. This is a pilot program to use that fuel. It's called Vivolium, and here we are, making Vivolium.
As Lee Raymond's assistant, Andy would announce Vivolium, Exxon's new biofuel to be made from the victims of climate change. And he'd even hand out a sample.
So it started out, we made one Reggie, and then we cast a bunch of Reggies in wax.
That's human hair right there.
This is a lot of experimenting to figure out how to make a candle smell like human flesh.
Ow! I lost a Reggie.
Quick!
Ow!
We wanted to make sure that the oilmen knew what the candles they'd be holding were made of. So we'd show them a tribute video to Reggie Watts, a terminally ill Exxon janitor who had volunteered to be turned into fuel.
I think I'd like to be a candle. I think a candle would be fun because there's just so many uses for a candle.
There are 6 billion people on this earth today. We're probably using the energies, maybe, of 1 billion of those at best.
They had me test a Hellfire missile once. That was pretty cool.
We simply haven't found the miracle fuel yet to replace petroleum, but we'll eventually get there if government gets out of the way.
We had his miracle fuel, and our grandfathers were turning over in their mass graves.
CTV News with Barb Higgins and Daryl Chance.
Good evening. A bizarre situation today at the Go Expo Energy Conference at Stampede Park.
Organizers and hundreds of Alberta oil and gas executives got duped.
They'd been promised a major announcement from a major player in the energy industry. Attendees paid $50 a head to hear this speech from the National Petroleum Council, a group that advises the White House on oil and gas matters.
Welcome to Go Expo's keynote luncheon. Please welcome S.K. Wolf.
First, I need to say how wonderful it is to see on all the faces here today the childlike exuberance of a great industry in full flower. And why not? Without oil, at least 4 billion people would starve, and starving would become the new black. But I'm not here today to pat us all on the back. I'm here to speak of Plan Bs.
As Andy began outlining Exxon's tough solution to climate change, 10 volunteers passed out 300 human flesh candles. This vigil would be like no other.
Who first had the idea to use the oil of a recently living animal to light his or her house? Even today, Shetland Islanders cut the heads off their puffins and put wicks in the stumps to make candles. We at Exxon firmly believe that a free market will, if left to its own devices, always find solutions to the dilemmas that humanity faces. We're calling our new technology Vivolium.
As Andy began to describe Exxon's new biofuel, the candles were lit. A strange odor rose into the air.
What you see here is an artist's rendition of an advanced, large-scale plant. The Vivolium feedstock is renewable and unprecious, and responds to the need of a shrinking market with greater supply. The dance of capital appears in full flower.
Finally, it was time to introduce Reggie Watts, the dying Exxon janitor who had volunteered to be turned into fuel. And now we begin the tribute video to Reggie Watts.
Worked in maintenance for a while. Moved up to maintenance 2, started doing cleanup, toxic spill cleanup.
After I heard from the doctor that I was going to die, I felt like I had something to live for.
Please switch this on.
Could we describe?
Please switch it off.
I think I'd like to be a candle. There's just so many uses for a candle. I mean, you know, like if you want something romantic, like that'd be nice to know. I was a candle on table, you know, when people, when they first met each other on a date. I think that would be great. I'd love that. That'd be a hoot.
This is a funerary observance. I mean, this guy died.
Switch this off before
This man died.
It's people. Really is.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
I'm very sorry, but we've been cut off. Apparently, we're not allowed to have a funerary observance for a man who's died to make a product possible. And I'm being, are you allowed to do that to me? What?
Reggie Watts was an ExxonMobil employee, and these are actually 30 or 40% from his actual cash.
So this time it is 80%, I'm sorry.
The remaining 20 is from what?
The remaining 20 is just, bonders to keep it together. We have to think in such a case.
What are your credentials with ExxonMobil? What is it? What part of his body?
Please, sure.
So he's not with Exxon, not with National Petroleum, nothing?
Boy, oh boy. They better screen them guys love better before they let them out.
Now, thank you.
Hey.
Shut it down.
Don't touch my camera.
Shut it down. Now.
Had we actually made the oil people think about what they were doing? It was hard to tell, and there wasn't much time left to figure it out. Big oil was already destroying the planet, and not just by speeding up climate change.
This house right here, it used to be on this side.
No way.
Yeah, it was over here. We moved over there. You know, I could only take it like 2 or 3 days a week coming down here to work. And this year for hunting season, I mean, I didn't kill nothing. I just wasn't in the mood to kill. You know, after seeing everything else that was dead, just wasn't in the mood. I mean, you know, not that I'm a big killer, but I like killing stuff.
Yeah.
It's really just amazing when you go downriver. Some of the ponds that we used to fish in are now almost like a bay.
For decades, the government had ignored scientists' warnings and let industry carve up the wetlands that protected New Orleans from storms.
About 1 million acres of land has disappeared since 1930. It was done canal by canal, oil field by oil field, port by port, parcel by parcel. It was, if you will, death by 1,000 cuts. The governing mindset culturally and legally was, if there's an impact, we'll deal with it later. And in some ways, it's, you know, this is a preview of what the rest of this country and the rest of the world have in store for them.
When Katrina hit, the wetlands weren't there to diminish its force, and the levees didn't stand a chance. So the real culprit for the destruction of New Orleans wasn't just a big hurricane, but greed, dressed up as progress.
What produced this tremendous improvement in technology? It was self-interest, or if you prefer, greed. The greed of producers who wanted to produce something that they could make $1 on.
Greed had caused the biggest catastrophe ever to hit the U.S. And now, the government was handing out billions of dollars in rebuilding contracts. In other words, letting greed solve the problem.
There has been this idea that it is government's responsibility to replan the construction of New Orleans. It's better to leave it to the market.
We wanted to take a closer look at how the market was fixing the U.S. Gulf Coast.
We're on our way to the Gulf Coast Reconstruction Conference at the Washington Convention Center. We're going to talk to a number of people who are busy reconstructing New Orleans.
Yeah, what's up?
There are many silver linings to this horrendous disaster, and with it has come an incredible opportunity.
I'm optimistic when I see a room full of folks who want to take advantage of the opportunities, and that's a good thing from our perspective. It's a great thing.
Well, you know, it's like the Israelis say, you know, once in a while a good crisis is not bad. You come up with new things.
We were seeing a lot of new things. But wasn't this supposed to be about Gulf Coast reconstruction?
We're especially interested in Gulf Coast reconstruction, and does this have anything to do with that?
This is for bomb detonation and ammunition storage.
Perimeter and physical security, mainly anti-ram road blockers.
This particular unit can be used in military applications.
Wow. So it's a real, like, catastrophe toilet, basically.
All this stuff would be great for the people of New Orleans if they were going to fight a war. Where was the stuff about helping people? Ah, here it was. The pavilion from Central Asia.
Kyrgyz people are ready to help the people of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama by erecting yurts there for them as a temporary shelter.
And here's the yurt.
Oh my God.
This is it. You can cover it up, you can build a fire, you can open it up, and if there's a flood, you can just take it up in less than an hour. And they're interested in sending one free of charge to Louisiana as a test, if you're interested. So, yep.
The yurt was the only solution here about helping people, but the government reps didn't seem very interested. There's no money in yurts. We decided we could outdo everyone at this conference and beat the free market at its own game. We would invent the ultimate disaster technology, a device so sophisticated it could protect anyone from pretty much anything. But it would cost so much that only the richest businessmen could afford it.
They kind of just flatten out.
Yeah.
The only question was, what company would make such a thing?
You've got to think Halliburton.
For they are the ones who do the research to make the mud, to build the tool, to run in the well, to make the test, to log the zone, to set the packer, cement the pipe and fire the gun, to perforate, to pump the gel that carries the sand, that props the frac, completes the well to produce the crude that runs the world for all the people all over the earth who live in the house that oil built.
Halliburton has been the world leader in extracting profit from every kind of disaster. They made billions off the first Gulf War and its sequel, and hundreds of millions off Katrina, all paid for by the U.S. government, whose vice president was once their own CEO.
Find the big red, find the big red, find the big red, hustling on.
If anyone could make a killing from total disaster, Halliburton would be the one.
This morning, we got up really early, drove up to the very fancy hotel, which shall remain nameless because they threatened us if we use the material with their name. But you know, what's it called basically, the hotel?
Ritz-Carlton.
Ritz-Carlton, that one.
How you doing?
I'm Northrop Goody. I'm here with Halliburton, with Fred Wolf. I'm just helping demo a product. So, would either one of you mind helping us demo the suits? We have 3 of them. So you have to actually step into it, pull it on. It's kind of like a coverall. You'll wear it?
I'll wear it.
All right, great. You're a good sport. You're a really good sport.
The catastrophic loss conference was for insurance people. They knew numbers.
No one, of course, would wish such a thing on any civilization. Yet without it, without the Black Plague, the old business models of Europe would never have been overturned by the entrepreneurs of the Renaissance. And what would the world be without the Mona Lisa? Or, closer to home, how about the Great Deluge? This world-ending disaster, literally, was surely seen as a terrible catastrophe by Noah's contemporaries and perhaps by Noah himself. Yet Noah was ready to seize the day, and at the end of that day, not only was there a whole new world, but Noah found himself with a monopoly of the animals. For those of us in positions of responsibility, however, who might have to take charge in a crisis, even more innovative solutions are necessary. I'd like now to introduce my colleague here, Dr. Northrop Goody, who's the head of our Emergency Products Development Unit at Halliburton. And Dr. Goody will be showing some mock-ups of some items that his unit has developed.
We want something that's going to be able to save a human being no matter what Mother Nature throws at him. And so this
is the answer. This is the Halliburton Survivaball. It's 3 easy steps for deployment: suiting up, inflating, and of course, launching. Launching out of a building, and we have an artist's rendition of what it might be like in Houston when we launch our Survivaballs. In the event of extreme catastrophe, there might be a scarcity of resources. In this case, we've got a Survivaball here that's going up and extracting resources, in this case from an animal. And you don't want to be exposed to the elements, but you still want to be able to extract resources from, for example, a cow. They're going to be able to go underwater, rated at 50 feet. They can be used in any condition. It doesn't matter whether you're in a landslide in California or even in the Arctic. Of course, any other conditions, whether it's tsunamis or tornadoes, the Survivaball is designed to withstand. But the best part of the Survivaball is that people need people. And so our biggest inspiration for the way that a community should work with Survivaballs comes from biology. As some of you probably know, amoebas gather together and actually form another body. They aggregate. And so these one-celled organisms come together as a single body. For example, here's a raft formation of Survivaballs in the ocean, floating, communicating, exchanging nutrients, differentiating function. Last of all, this is literally thousands of Survivaballs dancing through the streets.
And we'll be happy to take any questions. So if there are any more technical ones for Northrop here or general ones. Yep.
I mean, in my mind, this clearly also plays right into terrorist attacks. What kind of defense mechanisms being envisioned against biological, chemical, radiological attack?
If you could demonstrate the turtle position, please, that would be great. Basically, if you duck down...
I'll assume they'll have some kind of bubble mask or something.
Yeah, visor, heads-up display, the whole thing.
Very cool.
So.
To me, it was just the way it fit was probably if you're ever going to make them so people want to wear them for a long time, you'd have more cushioning or something. Yeah. But I can imagine they'd be pretty darn expensive to if you're going to really market them.
Well, yeah.
Although I guess the people who need them, most of the the price should be no object, right? And if you're getting them for say the
that's right.
cabinet, to pick a
Hi. Northrop.
Gary, how are you? It's very interesting. One of the things that we're trying to do is modeling of terrorism around the world. So, this is clearly, something that plays right into that kind of an event.
Well, it does. That's it. It's supposed
much more so than, Katrina.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
We'd done all we could to show these people what sucked about letting greed run our future.
Oh dear.
But instead of freaking out, they just took our business cards.
Hello. Wonderful, and if you want to take one of mine here.
Our effort had been a failure.
It's not very well articulated, really.
And come to think of it, all of our efforts had been failures. But you know, a yes man never gives up. We knew we could do it. All we needed was a whole new approach. Maybe making fun of stupid ideas was a stupid idea. We had to get smart, because the people with the really stupid ideas were very, very smart. For Friedman and his followers, disaster was not just a chance to get rich, but an opportunity to push through all kinds of unpopular policies. like privatizing public schools, shutting down public hospitals, and kicking people out of their homes. This is the Lafitte Housing Project. It survived Katrina intact. That was lucky for the thousands of residents who wanted to come home and rebuild. So what did the government do? They decided to tear it down.
The disaster for us started after the storm. When people found out that you were going to be marooned in a strange foreign city wanting to come home, and the government was going to take your home away.
This was hours before the storm. When storms happen everywhere else, people get a chance to go back home. This home to us. Why they gonna take away our pride and joy? They don't know what people going through.
The whole city that sort of washed away. Now you got to rebuild the whole thing. So part of what this was is if you ever had an idea that you couldn't get through before the storm, well, the storm meant that everything was, tossed salad. So if this idea had been roundly rejected by the city and by voters and whatever, but now's your chance to sneak on in.
When residents tried to come home after Katrina, they found themselves locked out by HUD, the U.S. government's Department of Housing and Urban Development.
The federal government came up with a program to dismantle public housing and privatize it, and that's what we're doing. And so you've got to develop a nice community so that the poor have an opportunity to live in an environment where people work, that they're part of the American dream, and you'll get a number of folks that are not used to the type of lifestyle that we all live, where trash is thrown on the ground or cursing off of the balcony.
The idea really is to provide role models, essentially, for poor folks, right?
Absolutely.
On the BBC, we tried to show that companies could behave differently, and we learned that they couldn't until government made rules to control them. Yet even here in New Orleans, where help was most needed, government was also drinking the free market Kool-Aid.
I believe in a market-driven process. Economics, capitalism is going to take over, and the marketplace is poised to respond.
So the government didn't believe in government. We knew what we had to do. We would become the government, and we would find out what would happen if government did the right thing.
We are preparing to go to the Gulf Coast Reconstruction Conference at the Pontchartrain Center in Kenner near the airport.
You shouldn't drive.
Okay. Here. So it's almost like we should be saying, we are facing a state of emergency. I'm going to speak as HUD, as the Deputy Assistant of the Secretary of HUD, who couldn't make it, and CNN is going to be covering it live.
This conference was taking place on the first anniversary of Katrina. 1,000 contractors who were rebuilding New Orleans would be there.
What's that?
Nagin's coming, Mayor Nagin.
Oh my God. Mayor Ray Nagin coming just a bit more than we expected would happen.
When we'd hatched our scheme, we told this guy, the conference organizer, that we represented Alphonso Jackson, the head of HUD. When the mayor and governor found out that Jackson would be there, they had to be there too. Once again, the keynote speaker wouldn't show up, but his assistant would. Would the mayor notice that something was wrong? And what would the contractors think of HUD's radical new approach to public housing, an approach that could cost them money and even put some of them out of a job?
Please join me in welcoming Mayor Ray Nagin of New Orleans. And please also join me in welcoming Renee Oswin, the Assistant Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
So it's an honor to share the stage with our two partners in recovery, with Renee Oswin representing HUD, who's definitely one of our most important partners in this rebuilding effort, and Mayor Nagin of New Orleans, whose challenges are enormous.
And I also want to stop and thank Renee, who's here from HUD. HUD has been an incredible, incredible partner with us. We are on the verge of doing some
really unique things, some things that we could have never tackled in the city of New Orleans. And now we are poised and positioned to enhance public housing in the city of New Orleans. You know, there's lots of information out there. There's lots of misinformation out there. You know, but I have a fundamental belief that truth and lie cannot stay in the same place at the same time. Reminds me of a story I once heard. Truth and lie went swimming one day in Lake Pontchartrain. They went skinny dipping, so they laid their clothes on the banks, and they were out there having a really good time. And then lie all of a sudden jumped out the water, put Truth's clothes on, and started running down Esplanade, Elysian Fields Avenue. Truth got out the water, started running after lie. So, ladies and gentlemen, what you had was a well-dressed lie being chased by naked truth.
It's quite a tough act to follow, nothing like that to make you feel a bit naked, eh? Dear friends, it is with the greatest joy that I announce to you today a brand new Department of Housing and Urban Development. Everything is going to change about the way we work, and the change is going to start right here today in New Orleans. Until last week, our MO here at HUD was to tear down public housing whenever we could. Like many folks in Washington, we thought that the projects caused crime and unemployment. We were wrong. When we tore down St. Thomas and replaced it with mixed-income flats, only one of 27 former residents ever made it back, and the rest have faced many problems, in some cases even homelessness. It just didn't work. We won't make that error again. This afternoon, we will begin to reopen all public housing projects in New Orleans and allow these Americans to be part of their city once again. But opening doors won't be enough. As you know, the main reason New Orleans was so vulnerable to Katrina was the destruction of the wetlands. I am very, very, very pleased to announce that Exxon and Shell have agreed to finance wetlands rebuilding from part of the $60 billion in profits this year. As J. Stephen Simon, Exxon Vice President, writes, ExxonMobil is earmarking $8.6 billion from revenues our company has made in this region so as to assure that ExxonMobil never again has a hand in destroying a large American city. Ladies and gentlemen, we will rebuild not just New Orleans, we will rebuild the American dream. Please come join us at the Lafitte Housing Complex for a ribbon-cutting ceremony immediately after the plenary session. This is what we're all here for, so let's make it happen. Let's bring New Orleans back.
I thought it was very uplifting. This has been a big problem. A lot of people want to come home, and they have been unable to do so. So I thought it was a very positive message.
Well, very encouraging. And what's really encouraging in particular is not only getting people back home and helping them rebuild, but the recognition that we have to deal with Mother Nature, and that Exxon is going to make some significant contribution to restore wetlands. It's very encouraging.
This was encouraging. When the contractors heard that the government was going to do the right thing, even though it might cost them some business, they cheered. Friedman was wrong. Greed alone didn't rule the world.
Hi, what's CBS Radio, WWL? Mind if I talk to you over here? Absolutely. Do you have a card?
Okay, thank you.
And this time, we'd gotten away with it. Or so we thought.
The city and the state both say they've not heard anything about this. This announcement comes as a surprise to the governor's office and the mayor's office. Why would HUD do this without consulting the city and the state?
Well, we haven't done this without consulting with them.
You have no cards. You say you're new to the agency?
I have a card, but it's back at the office. I'll get it to you.
Where is your PR team?
I'm right here. Hi.
There.
Hi, you're with HUD?
Yes, I am.
Do you have a card?
There's an entire HUD housing project there left unfinished.
Yeah. There are some saying that this is a farce, that you're not truly with HUD, and that this is not an actual announcement.
Well, they can say whatever they want. Who are these people?
Where is your office?
In Washington.
Where in Washington?
He just joined the agency from France.
From France?
Yeah, he's been a special attaché to the Department of the Interior in France. Why are you so skeptical?
I just heard the speech, and I have a newscast very shortly. I need to confirm if it was a real speech from HUD or not. The governor and the mayor knew nothing of it. They were shocked. We desperately need to know if this is real or not. He's standing right here, the man who's just apparently committed this hoax on your department. Okay, I'm on the phone with HUD right now, and they say you're a liar.
Okay, well, they can say whatever they want.
I'm sorry?
They can say whatever they'd like.
They can say whatever they'd like, but you work for them, don't you, as a deputy secretary?
That's right.
Now that you've been discovered, do you want to explain to me why you did it? I mean, if you're trying to make a point, why don't you come over here and tell me why you did this? All right? All right, man. I'll call you in a few minutes. But it is a hoax, a massive hoax perpetrated today. You just pulled off a heck of a hoax.
Thank you. I would say that, you know, HUD is pulling off a hoax by pretending that tearing down affordable housing is what's going to solve it. I mean, that's what they've been doing until now. This is a time when all of these people are clamoring to get back in. They want to get back into their housing, and they deserve to be there. It's crazy.
And worth lying to all these people.
Absolutely.
To try to make your point.
Actually telling the truth. This is actually truth-telling where normally there would only be lies.
How difficult would it be to remediate what you see here today and make it inhabitable, say, next week?
Just take off the covers here.
Oh, yeah, that's a good start, yeah.
Absolutely.
Finally, we will be reopening public housing for the residents, for the workforce that's going to move back in and again rebuild New Orleans.
Sick, twisted, cruel. Those are all words used to describe the prank on Louisiana officials and about 1,000 contractors in New Orleans today.
I'm Deputy Assistant Secretary of the assistant, essentially, of Secretary Alphonso Jackson.
Renee Oswin can't get his title right or his relationship to HUD Secretary Alphonso Jackson. After taking the mayor for a ride, these contractors followed him to a makeshift ribbon cutting at the Lafitte Housing Project.
Mr. Oswin, you're not even on the directory of HUD. You're not even listed. You don't even have a phone number.
It's come to that, has it? It's come to that. Well, thanks for being the one to break the news.
Hano, the Housing Authority of New Orleans, says this is simply a cruel, cruel joke, trying to give people some kind of fake hope that they were going to be able to move back.
It is terribly sad that someone would perpetuate such a cruel hoax and play on the fears and anxieties of families who are desperate to return to their homes.
We just had it confirmed from HUD that he's not actually an employee of HUD. This is all a big hoax, this whole ceremony here, this whole press conference.
But I guess it's just to call their hand. It's just to call their hand. I respect this hoax because maybe it'll take a host like this to bring them out here to see what we going through. So if a host would it be, a host is what we got. And I ain't mad. I'm going to eat some barbecue.
And I think what you guys exposed is the fact that HUD could do these great things if they wanted to. Secondly, you got the attention of the residents, so now they're going to begin to ask, well, why aren't you doing these things? And number three, you're creating a controversy to feed off, to organize, and to build a struggle to the next level. So in my opinion, everything y'all did was excellent.
It had all been worthwhile. We were on top of the world. But then, reality began to sink in. We'd made a splash, but we hadn't fixed the world. The free market was still destroying New Orleans. All over the world, people were losing their homes. Climate change kept getting worse. And in Bhopal, people continued to suffer. We really did need to fix the world. But it was going to take more than two guys with cheap suits and fake websites. It would take millions of us. But even as old regimes were swept away, we knew that real change wouldn't come easy. After all, the free market cult was still here.
Wealth, money, privatization, wealth, money, free markets, privatization, ownership, a great deal of money. Now, we can afford that.
Remember these guys? They're not going away. And neither would we. We needed a really ambitious plan, because all we ever read in the newspapers was how we needed to put everything back on track, back to how it was before it fell apart. But how it was the problem. We needed to show what real change could look like. So together with a whole lot of friends, we would blanket Manhattan with 100,000 copies of our very own newspaper. We'd call it the New York Times. Except our New York Times would be a little bit different. Ours would be set 6 months in the future. It would show what could happen if we set our imagination free.
Things have gotten pretty bad, and I think it's hard for people to imagine the world working another way. So we're trying to, as realistically as possible, present this world as it could be.
They just brought out the proof of the New York Times, and it looks unfucking believable.
Really good.
The obvious question, how the heck did you do it? Andy, you want to start? How long were you working on this thing, and how many of you?
Well, there were a lot of us. It wasn't just the Yes Men, it was a large group of people. We were just one of many groups. It was an idea that sparked a lot of people's imaginations. They wanted to see this happen. And that's sort of the message of the paper as well, is that, great, we elected Obama, and that's fantastic, but now the real work begins.
The idea was to put out something that was optimistic, that says, we can do all these things. Why not? We created the system that we have now, so why not create a good one instead? Wow. Very good. Let me tie you up. This is the big day. 7 a.m. rush hour. This is the time to get the papers out there.
Three times. Special issue. Special issue.
Free New York Times. Special edition of the New York Times. Free New York Times. This is real?
It's fake, right?
Who publishes this? Can I grab another one, please? What? What? New York Times.
National Health Insurance Act passes.
The Patriot Act repealed.
Maximum wage law succeeds. Good luck with that one.
This is too good to be true, but it's not impossible.
It's a dream newspaper, right? It's like you wake up and all the things that you wanted became the news.
The war's over!
Our fake news was a hit. But would the real news pick it up?
You don't work for the New York Times. Who is it that you work for handing this out?
A guy named John Smith?
Who?
Yeah, John Smith.
John Smith.
It's a New York Times special edition. Is there anything wrong with it? I mean...
Well, yeah, it's not the New York Times.
Extra, extra, read all about it. The New York Times declares the war in Iraq is over.
Some commuters got their hands on what looks like a special edition of the New York Times. As you might have guessed, though, it's a fake.
Eine New York Times in die Hand gedrückt bekamen, trauten jedenfalls ihren Augen nicht.
Джордж Буш отдан под суд, а Кондолиза Райс приносит официальные извинения за недостоверную.
We printed a paper with the headlines that we'd like to see. So if these are the headlines that people were so excited to read this morning, let's make them happen. I think we have to exercise some muscles we either don't have or that have atrophied or something. A civic muscle, a thrifty muscle, a generous muscle.
We've got to take back our government. March into City Hall and say, here, we've got the solutions.
We can think of the different ways that we can contribute to a movement that says business as usual is unacceptable because people are being hurt and we're not going to play the role, the subservient, routine role that we usually play.
Let's go.
make change happen, put your effort on the line to make something happen. And that's what kind of we did here, and maybe it's what, it's kind of, oh boy.
No, I know, yeah. Well, and if a few people at the top can make the bad news happen, then why can't all of us at the bottom get together and make the good news happen for a change? I mean, for real.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to get your very own copy of that fake New York Times, all the news you could see, go to theyesmen.org/store. And if you want to see a lot more of this stuff happen, visit theyesmen.org/lab. Sign up.
All right, so thank you for tuning into our special presentation. Cyrus Hill here, filling in for Sidepocket while he does important duties for the city of Jersey City. I will be returning sometime later this week or later this month, I don't know, for, I think there's a Circuit Breakers thing, I don't know. But I'll be here for our meeting on the 3rd Friday of the month, so you'll see me again there. Sidepocket probably has more streams scheduled up for that. And until then, this has been DEF CON 201. Keep hacking, keep learning, hack the planet, etc., etc. Taglines. I'll see you guys and everyone else next time. Get the
Can you be my? Can you be? Can you be my? Or cutie? Can you be my? Can you be? Can you be my? Or cutie?
I can be a horror cutie. I can be a horror cutie.